Every freelancer has to answer this question is, how much is this project worth for me? Or how much can I make with this client? And I'm here to say, I bet you don't know the answer. It has taken me years to realize the answer to this question. And once I did figure it out, my freelancing income shot up to way over $1 million. So I'm gonna go ahead and structure the video just like this. First off, I'm gonna talk about how to understand what is the value of a client. And then I'm gonna talk about mistakes I've had in the past. And then after that, I'm going to talk about the successes I've had in the past. Stick around to the last section of the video because I'm going to talk about how you can fully unlock the LTV of all your past and future clients. So first off, let's talk about what it means to understand the value of a client. And when you first get asked this question, you might just think well, okay, the project is $20,000, so this client is worth $20,000. Or if it's hourly, you're like, this is a month worth of work. I can do 200 hours on it, 200 times $100 an hour. That's $20,000 there. So that's the value of that client. And I bet when you first started this video, you would think that this is a trick question. And you're right, it is a trick question because that value, the $20,000 of a project or hourly, that's not the true value of a client. In this video, I want to talk about the LTV. So it's the lifetime value of a client. And the second you start thinking of it in that way, things start to shift a little bit. Then you realize that a project isn't worth just what it is for that one project. So during that one project, you have to be thinking in the form of the lifetime of this client. And it's not just that project. We're thinking outside of after the project's done and when the project is going. And there's a million different ways that you can increase your value to yourself by bringing in more contracts, more income, more projects, and also providing more value to that client as a whole. All right, so let's just go ahead and start talking about the mistakes I've had in the past for some of my clients. Some of the biggest mistakes is treating the client as a means to an end. Like, it's a temporary project. I'm just trying to get this done so that I can move on to a bigger project later in the year. Like, I have this span where I don't have work and I just need to pick this up and keep going. One of those projects I was trying to assist on getting a product off the ground, and they just needed to knock out some tickets in their backlog so that they could try to prove to their investors that they can finish the project. And the problem is I never talked to them again. I never talked to them essentially when I was working outside of the work itself, and I just executed and I left. And I've never really talked to that client again. And that is a huge mistake, a huge red flag, because in a way I left a ton of money on the table. And I can explain that later in the video about how and why I made such a mistake here. Another mistake that I made is when taking some of this short-term work is just the idea of having my blinders on, because I would go in and try to code up some stuff that was needed by that client. But the problem was I didn't talk to anyone else in the company. And the person that I was reporting to, I just talked to them during that, just about that project, and that was it. And then when I left that project, I really had no way of reaching out and talking to that person ever again. And that is another huge mistake because you always need to think about the lifetime span of this relationship. Even if it's just one little project, you want to keep thinking in the context of how can we keep talking for the rest of my career? And it's not crazy to think in that long term. It is that serious to be able to think about someone and how long you're going to be able to talk to them throughout your whole career, not just this one little project. So the successes I've had when considering the lifetime value of a client, I would love to say that it was all on purpose and I understood LTV and I knew that this is the best choice for my career, because that's not true at all. I lucked into it. I just stumbled into this whole idea and was eternally grateful for why I was able to actually stick with this client. This one client has provided the bulk of my freelancing income because I've been working with them for 6 or 7 years, where they are a steady source of income and I provide steady, stable support for them in their business. Where I almost made a mistake is when I was first talking to the CEO and I was trying to determine the parameters of the contract. And he was just saying that we need you part-time to be able to provide support, some features here and there for this custom application. What do you think? Do you want the job? And I was like, okay, great. Well, the tech doesn't seem great. And how about let's start with 3 months and we'll see how 3 months looks like. And the CEO immediately goes, that won't work. We're expecting someone to stick around for at least 2 years. And this is where I got super lucky because I almost hung up the phone call right there of thinking, I don't want to deal with this tech for the next 2 years. That sounds like a pain in the butt. But I ended up saying yes, and it is the most rewarding client that I've ever worked with. In that moment, that was 7 years ago, and I've still been working with this client. I'm still providing value, and we're still having a steady income and making my freelancing dreams come true because I just said yes to this. So after hearing that story, you probably need to understand, or you probably already understand what I'm trying to get at, is that every single project should be treated like something that you could be working with this person for the rest of your life. And just because it's the rest of your life, it doesn't mean that it's every day. You could work with them every year or so. Say they have a bunch of work that needs to be done in the spring. This is where the true lifetime value of a client comes in. Just because that was $20,000 in the beginning, that doesn't mean the LTV is just $20,000. You don't know the LTV. No one knows the LTV of a client until they can actually get a good feel of what kind of work might be in the future. So with that kind of mindset, we got to think about a couple things to think about when we're trying to determine what clients we want to work with, how we can get the most value out of every single client and maximize that LTV. Here are some of the good questions to ask yourself is when you're trying to take on a new client is this work going to last a long time? And what kind of maintenance work is afterwards? So when you're working on something, try to visualize in the future, like, will this need more work in the future? And that's something that you could pitch for a year down the road, 2 years down the road. All software needs to be upgraded. Everything needs to be polished and kept up to speed, whether that's like copywriting or any other sort of freelancing, but especially in code, there's a maintenance factor. And you could always be there to help them out and keep their business running. Another thing is you want to make sure that you're looking at clients that are definitely profitable. This is the best way to determine whether or not they're going to have long ongoing work, is whether or not they're actually making a profit from the business they're in. There's definitely cases in startups or in smaller companies that aren't profitable, that if you make a good impression, then the person working in that company will remember you. If they move to a different company and they need some freelancing work, they can think of you. And that client is no longer the LTV of that company, it's that person you talked with. And that becomes a person in your network that values the kind of work you're doing and will bring you on board when they need help. So in this area, I personally believe long-running profitable businesses are the best way to go. And another way to get a feel for what kind of value you can get from the LTV of a client is to determine how well this job can turn into multiple jobs, whether it's a referral program, because word of mouth marketing, word of mouth advertising is probably the most valuable way to find work in the future, because you've already been vetted by doing real work with this client or with their friend in the past, and that can bring you work in the future. So what I'm trying to say is that all of this work, everything that you would do for small projects to larger projects, always keep in mind that you want to keep in touch with everyone that you work with, other freelancers, other business leaders, and people that you could see yourself maybe finding work with them in the future. And even if you don't find a way that you can have more business with them in the future, they would be a great person in your network because they see the good work that you're doing. So it's good not to only make those connections now, but also revisit them every year. Coming back to people that you've worked with in the past is the best way to find new work when it's not really new work. It's people that you've worked with in the past. You can re-engage and find some new work with this person. So if you're really curious about this kind of freelancing lifestyle and I can talk more about my career in freelancing, I have this video right here where I've talked about how much I've made and also just kind of my history of going through this. So go ahead and hop on that video if you're interested, and I'll see you around to the next one.